My parents used my childhood accident to control me for 25 years, then tried to get conservatorship when I married another deaf person, so I exposed their financial fraud. Now they have a 5-year restraining order. I was deep in spreadsheet hell when my lasagna decided to recreate Dante's Inferno in my kitchen. Being deaf means you miss things like smoke alarms. You'd think I'd notice the smoke, except I was so focused on my work that by the time I looked up, my kitchen was basically a disaster movie. Then I just froze, because suddenly I was 7 again watching my family's car burn while I was still trapped inside. My dad saved mom first because she was pregnant, then my little sister Aisha because she was 4, and then boom, an explosion. No more hearing, no more smooth skin, just me and my scars that make strangers stare. So there I was, 25 years later, having a complete breakdown while my brain replayed Dad's face through the car window. I couldn't even use my phone because my hands were shaking so bad. Thankfully, my neighbors did manage to call 911. Then this firefighter named Aaron burst through my door. He put one hand on my shoulder real gently and used clear gestures to guide me out, staying calm even though the smoke was getting intense. Once outside, my neighbors swarmed around me, and even though I can only lip read half of what angry people say, I caught the gist of it. My building manager looked ready to evict me right there and then. Well, if I still had an apartment, that is. But Aaron stepped between us and told them to back off, and I mean really told them based on how fast they shut up. He stayed with me through everything, even at the hospital where they couldn't find an interpreter, and he made them figure it out. Then Aisha showed up signing, again, fire again, with that special blend of annoyance she's been perfecting since childhood. See, Aisha always hated that I got attention after the accident. Never mind that I would have traded every second of pity for her perfect skin and hearing. When Aaron came back with a sandwich, she immediately went into flirt mode, but he just nodded politely and handed me the food, then wrote his number saying to text if I needed anything. After he left, Aisha informed me I couldn't stay with her because she couldn't have a fire hazard in her apartment. So I was forced to get a hotel that sucked. I was too scared to leave my room, so I just sat there for days, feeling more alone than ever. My job was completely work from home, and I managed to save my laptop so I was good for money. But after 3 days, it was too much. So I texted Aaron where I was, and this wonderful man started leaving care packages at the front desk with notes like, real food because hotel vending machines are depressing. I tried texting my parents, but they said they couldn't handle taking care of me right now. I wanted to scream that I didn't need taking care of, just a couch. But then I remembered the fire and thought, okay, maybe I need a little help, just not the helplessness they assume. Then the packages stopped, and Aaron didn't answer texts. I figured he'd realize the scarred deaf girl was too much work, but when I called the firehouse, they told me he'd gone into a burning warehouse to save someone and the roof collapsed on top of him. Apparently, he's been in the ICU for days. I started visiting daily, bringing my own care packages. He was completely unconscious, but I still started talking to him about going to the grocery store for the first time in years and apartment hunting. His firefighter brothers were the only other visitors, and they started calling me Aaron's girl, which made me feel things. The nurse said he'd probably lost his hearing permanently, so I bought every American Sign Language book I could find. 3 weeks later, he woke up. I walked in to see him reading one. When he saw me, his face lit up, and he signed a clumsy, "Thank you for the books." We spent an hour writing notes to one another, even bruised with tubes everywhere. He had this warmth that pulled me in. We made plans to meet when he got out so I could teach him ASL. Watching him struggle was like looking in a mirror, except I could help instead of drown. His brother firefighters didn't know how to interact anymore, and he was devastated that he couldn't go back to his job. I used every trick I'd learned to help him see that different didn't mean over. Then my job threatened to fire me for slacking off. I realized I hated it anyway, and Aaron helped me get a position teaching ASL at a school. I loved working with kids learning to navigate without sound. The department created emergency protocols for deaf people based on us, and Aaron started teaching disability awareness. Everything was great until I introduced him to my parents, who were thrilled about the firefighter part, until they learned he was deaf too, and dinner became a lecture about needing someone to take care of me, not another burden. I signed back, maybe they should ask what I need, while Aaron held my hand. We left before dessert, and I was still fuming when Aaron swerved towards smoke rising blocks away. My body went cold seeing the house with flames shooting out. Before I could process anything, Aaron was running toward the building, turning back just to tell me to call 911, but my hands wouldn't work. I watched him disappear into the fire that took everything from me twice. Soon some people stumbled out, a woman with kids, an old man, but no Aaron. The flames got bigger and the sirens sounded far. Next thing I knew, my feet were moving, running, toward the house, toward the fire, toward him. The smoke hit me like a wall, thick and choking, making my eyes water instantly. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth, remembering Aaron teaching me about smoke inhalation during one of our ASL sessions. Stay low, he'd signed. The smoke rises. I dropped to my hands and knees, crawling forward into the darkness. The heat pressed against my skin, reminding me of that night 25 years ago. But this time was different. This time I wasn't trapped. This time I was choosing to go in. My hands scraped against debris as I felt my way forward, searching for any sign of Aaron. A beam had fallen across the hallway, still smoldering. I squeezed underneath it, splinters catching on my clothes. Then I saw him. Aaron was pinned under a massive section of ceiling that had collapsed, his leg twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. His eyes were closed, his face covered in soot. I grabbed his shoulders and shook him, but he didn't respond. The smoke was getting thicker, burning my lungs with every breath. I tried lifting the debris off his leg, but it wouldn't budge. Think, think, think. Aaron had taught me about leverage during one of his disability awareness classes. I spotted a metal pipe nearby and wedged it under the beam, using my whole body weight to pry it up just enough to drag Aaron free. His leg dragged uselessly as I pulled him toward what I hoped was the exit. My strength was fading fast. The smoke made everything blur together. I couldn't tell which way was out anymore. Then suddenly hands were grabbing me, pulling both of us. Aaron's crew had arrived. They carried us out into the blessed cool air where paramedics were waiting. I couldn't stop coughing. Each breath felt like sandpaper in my throat. The paramedics put an oxygen mask on my face, but something was wrong. The world had gone completely silent. Not the muffled quiet I was used to, but absolute nothing. The smoke had taken what little hearing I had left. At the hospital, they kept us in adjacent rooms. I couldn't sleep, terrified that Aaron wouldn't wake up. The doctors wrote on a whiteboard that his leg was badly broken, but would heal. They were more worried about the smoke inhalation. For me, they confirmed what I already knew. My remaining hearing was gone, probably permanently. 3 days later, I was sitting by Aaron's bed when his eyes finally opened. He looked confused at first, then focused on me. His hand moved slowly, spelling out letters in the air. When I realized what he was doing, tears started rolling down my face. He was trying to sign. The nurse came in with a whiteboard, and Aaron wrote shakily, "Can't hear anything. Is this how you feel all the time?" I nodded, then wrote back, "Welcome to my world. At least we match now." He actually smiled at that, this beautiful broken smile that made my heart skip. Over the next weeks, we recovered together. Aaron's leg required surgery and months of physical therapy ahead. My lungs slowly cleared, though the doctor said I'd always have some scarring, but we had each other. I taught him more ASL while he taught me breathing exercises to help with the lung damage. One afternoon, Aaron's hands were steadier as he signed, "I have something important to ask you." My heart started racing as he continued, "I know this is crazy. We've only known each other a few months, but almost losing you in that fire made me realize something." He paused, taking a deep breath before his hands moved again. "I love you. Will you marry me?" I stared at him, sure I'd misunderstood the signs, but he repeated them, slower this time, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yes," I signed back, my hands shaking. "Yes, yes, yes." We started planning right there in the hospital. Nothing fancy, we decided. Just family and Aaron's firefighter brothers. We'd use our story to advocate for better emergency protocols for deaf people. Aaron was already talking about teaching ASL to first responders, and I wanted to expand my teaching to include adults who'd lost their hearing later in life. The wedding came together faster than expected. 6 months after the fire, I stood in a simple white dress in my parents' backyard. Aaron's firefighter brothers formed an honor guard, their dress uniforms crisp in the afternoon sun. My parents had finally come around after seeing how Aaron and I supported each other through recovery. Even Mom smiled when Aaron signed his vows, but the biggest surprise was Aisha. She approached me before the ceremony, her hands moving carefully in signs she'd clearly been practicing. "I'm sorry," she signed, "for everything. For being jealous, for not being there when you needed me. You're my sister and I love you." We hugged, both of us crying and probably ruining our makeup. The ceremony was beautiful. Aaron's captain served as officiant, learning key phrases in ASL so both our families could follow along. When Aaron signed "I do," his movements were confident and clear. We'd come so far from those first clumsy lessons in the hospital. At the reception, Aaron's crew surprised us with a dance they'd choreographed entirely in ASL to our favorite song. My dad actually teared up during his speech, saying he'd never seen me happier. For the first time in 25 years, I felt like our family was whole again. The reception wound down as the sun set, painting everything in warm golden light. Aaron and I sat at our sweetheart table, watching our families mingle. His firefighter brothers were teaching my cousins basic ASL signs, turning it into a drinking game that had everyone laughing. Mom approached with a champagne flute, her movements careful as she signed, "Beautiful ceremony." Dad followed behind, actually attempting to fingerspell "congratulations," though he butchered half the letters. 2 weeks into our honeymoon at a quiet beach cottage, everything felt perfect. Aaron's leg was healing well, and we spent mornings doing physical therapy exercises on the sand. Afternoons were for ASL practice, where I taught him regional variations and slang that made him laugh. We'd found our rhythm, communicating through touch and signs, creating our own silent world. The first sign of trouble came when we returned home. A certified letter waited in our mailbox, addressed to both of us. Inside, legal documents stated that my parents were petitioning for conservatorship over me, citing my complete deafness and inability to make sound decisions following recent traumatic events. My hands trembled as I showed Aaron. He signed back, "This makes no sense. You teach. You live independently. Why now?" We drove to my parents' house immediately. Mom answered the door with a practiced smile, but her eyes darted nervously. Dad sat in his recliner, papers spread across the coffee table, bank statements, insurance documents, investment portfolios I didn't even know existed. "Sit down, sweetheart," Mom said, her lips moving slowly like I was a child. "We need to discuss your future." Aaron's hand found mine under the table as Dad launched into his prepared speech. The gist was clear even through my limited lip reading. They'd been managing a trust fund from my accident settlement all these years. Now that I was completely disabled and making reckless decisions, they needed legal control to protect me. Protect me from what? I signed furiously. From living my life? Mom's face hardened. From burning down more buildings? From marrying someone who can't even support you properly? Aaron can't work as a firefighter anymore. How will you survive? Aaron's jaw clenched, but he kept his signs controlled. We both have jobs. We support each other. Dad shuffled through the papers, pulling out medical reports from our recent hospitalizations. 2 deaf people living together? What happens in an emergency? What happens when you have children? This is about being practical. The meeting deteriorated from there. They'd already spoken to a lawyer, already filed paperwork. If we didn't agree voluntarily, they'd pursue it through the courts, using the apartment fire and my impulsive rescue attempt as evidence of impaired judgment. We left without another word. In the car, Aaron's hands flew in sharp, angry movements. They planned this, waited until after the wedding so it would look less suspicious. He was right. The timing was too convenient. They'd smiled through our wedding, given touching speeches, all while preparing to take control of my life. Over the next days, we discovered the extent of their preparation. They'd contacted my employer, expressing concerns about my ability to teach children safely. Anonymous complaints had been filed about our apartment, claiming we were a fire hazard. Even Aaron's disability benefits were being questioned, with someone suggesting he was exaggerating his hearing loss. Aisha arrived at our door one evening, her face flushed. "I need to tell you something," she signed, then stopped, starting over twice before continuing. "Mom and Dad have been planning this for months, since before your apartment fire." My stomach dropped. Aaron stepped forward, his signs careful. "What do you mean before?" Aisha's hands shook as she explained. "Our parents had been struggling financially, bad investments eating through their retirement. They'd been counting on my trust fund, managed to access some of it over the years for administrative costs. But when I started dating Aaron, started building a life they couldn't control, they panicked. The conservatorship would give them full access." Aisha signed, tears streaming. "They need the money, but they've convinced themselves it's for your own good. Dad keeps saying you'll thank them someday." The betrayal cut deep. Every supportive word, every smile at our wedding had been a lie. But what hurt most was Aisha's next confession. "I knew at the wedding. That's why I apologized. I couldn't stand being part of it anymore." Her signs became frantic. "They want me to testify that you've always been unstable since the accident, that you're getting worse." Aaron's hand on my shoulder kept me grounded as my world tilted. "Will you?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Aisha's face crumpled. "They're my parents too. They paid for my college, my car. If I don't help," she trailed off and straightened. "No, I won't. Not anymore." That night, Aaron and I lay awake planning. We couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle, but we couldn't give in either. Aaron suggested we document document everything, create a paper trail showing our competence. I had a different idea. The next morning, we invited my parents for coffee. They arrived looking confident, Mom carrying another folder of documents. I let them settle in before beginning. We've been thinking about your concerns. I signed slowly, making sure they could follow. You're right that two deaf people face unique challenges. Mom's face lit up. I knew you'd see reason. Which is why, I continued, we've been working with the fire department to create comprehensive safety protocols for deaf households. Aaron's been developing training programs. I've been creating educational materials. We're turning our experience into something positive. Dad's expression soured. That doesn't address the financial aspects. Aaron took over, his signs deliberate. Actually, it does. We've secured grant funding for our programs. 3 fire departments want to hire us as consultants. We're building a business around disability education. It wasn't entirely true yet, but the seeds were there. Aaron had been corresponding with his old department, and they were interested. My school had already asked me to expand my ASL program. Mom stood abruptly. This is exactly what we're talking about. Impulsive decisions. Starting a business when you can barely take care of yourselves? We're not asking for permission. I signed firmly. We're informing you of our plans. The gloves came off then. Dad slammed his hand on the table, shouting words I couldn't hear but whose meaning was clear. Mom's face twisted with fury as she gestured wildly. Aaron and I sat calmly, letting them exhaust themselves. Finally, Dad pulled out his phone, typing furiously before showing me the screen. We've already filed the paperwork. Court date is in 3 weeks. Save yourself the embarrassment and agree now. We left them with their threats. Outside, Aisha waited by her car. I recorded everything, she signed, showing us her phone. Audio and video. They don't know I was here. It was a start, but we needed more. Over the following days, we worked tirelessly. Aaron contacted every firefighter he knew, gathering character references. I documented my teaching methods, collected testimonials from parents whose children thrived in my classes. We installed visual smoke alarms, documented our emergency protocols, created a video showing how we navigated daily life. But my parents weren't idle. The anonymous complaints escalated. Someone reported me to Child Protective Services, claiming I couldn't properly supervise children. Aaron's physical therapy appointments were mysteriously canceled. Our landlord received notices about building code violations that didn't exist. The pressure was exhausting. Aaron's leg hurt more from stress, and my lungs ached when anxiety tightened my chest. We communicated in shorter signs, too tired for full conversations. One night, I found him staring at our wedding photo, tears on his cheeks. Maybe they're right, he signed when he noticed me. Maybe I can't take care of you properly. I knelt beside him, forcing him to meet my eyes. You saved people from burning buildings. You learned an entire language for me. You're the strongest person I know. But I can't even protect you from your own family, he replied, his movements sharp with frustration. That's when I realized we'd been playing defense, reacting to their moves instead of making our own. Time to change tactics. The next morning, I called a family meeting. Not just parents and Aisha, but aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everyone who'd celebrated at our wedding. Mom tried to object, but I'd already sent the invitations. They gathered in my grandmother's living room, curiosity and concern mixing on their faces. Aaron and I stood together, prepared flip charts behind us. We'd spent all night preparing, creating a presentation that would either save us or destroy what remained of my family relationships. I started by showing pictures from the accident 25 years ago. The burned car, 7-year-old me in the hospital, the years of surgeries and therapy that followed. Then I showed my college graduation, my teaching certificate, my apartment before the fire. I've been independent for 10 years, I signed, Aisha voicing for those who didn't understand. I've lived alone, worked, paid taxes, built a life. Aaron took over, showing his own journey, firefighter training, commendations for bravery, the warehouse collapse, his recovery and adaptation. Our audience leaned forward, engaged despite themselves. Then we showed the legal documents my parents had filed, the conservatorship petition, the claims of incompetence, the financial control they sought. Gasps rippled through the room as relatives realized what was happening. My grandmother, matriarch of our family, raised her weathered hand. At 92, she still commanded respect. Why? She asked my parents. Why would you do this to your own daughter? Mom's composed facade cracked. We're trying to protect her. You didn't see the apartment fire. She could have died. So could anyone, my uncle interjected. He'd been translating for his deaf son, my cousin Marcus. Should we lock up everyone who's ever had an accident? The room erupted in arguments, signing and speaking, creating a chaos I couldn't follow. Aaron squeezed my hand, reminding me to breathe. This was our chance. I stood on a chair, waving for attention. When the room quieted, I made my final play. Mom, Dad, I know about the trust fund. I know about your debts. I know you need money. Dad's face went white. Mom started to protest, but I continued. I'm willing to help, but not through conservatorship, not through control. As your daughter who loves you despite everything. The room held its breath. My parents looked at each other, 28 years of marriage communicating silently. Finally, Dad's shoulders sagged. We never meant for it to go this far, he said, Aisha translating with tears in her eyes. We were scared. Scared of losing everything. Scared of failing you again like we did in that fire. There it was, the wound that had festered for 25 years. They'd saved everyone but me first, and the guilt had poisoned every interaction since. You didn't fail me, I signed, my own tears falling. You saved my life. You got me out. That's all that matters. Mom broke down completely, signing apologies mixed with spoken words I couldn't hear. The family closed in, offering support and gentle scolding. My grandmother took charge, as she always did in crisis. We'll figure this out as a family, she declared. No courts, no lawyers, just family. It took hours of negotiation, but we found a solution. Aaron and I would help my parents financially, but through a structured loan, not surrender of autonomy. In return, they'd withdraw the conservatorship petition and support our disability education business. My uncle, who ran a successful construction company, offered to invest in our programs. My cousin Marcus volunteered to help teach ASL. Even Aisha committed to learning more signs to help with presentations. As the family dispersed, my parents approached hesitantly. Dad's signs were clumsy, but sincere. I'm sorry. We lost sight of who you've become. Mom nodded, adding, you're stronger than we ever gave you credit for, both of you. Aaron accepted their apology gracefully, but I needed more time. Trust, once broken, required careful rebuilding. We agreed to family counseling with a therapist fluent in ASL. The legal threat dissolved within days. My parents' lawyer, confused by the sudden withdrawal, called multiple times. Dad simply told him the family had resolved things internally. Our business began taking shape. Aaron's former captain became our first official client, hiring us to train the entire department. My school expanded my program, adding evening classes for parents. We created online modules for emergency responders nationwide. 3 months later, we presented at a national firefighters conference. Aaron stood beside me, his signs confident as he described adaptive techniques for deaf victims. The standing ovation felt like redemption, but the real victory came in smaller moments. Dad learning to sign "I love you" properly. Mom asking our opinion before making assumptions. Aisha becoming our biggest advocate, promoting our programs on social media. The trust fund, when finally transferred to my control, held more than expected. We used part for the business, part for adaptive equipment for other deaf families. The rest went into savings for the children we hope to have someday. One evening, Aaron and I sat on our balcony, the same one where we'd first met during the fire. New visual alarms blinked reassuringly inside. Our laptops showed booking requests from fire departments across 3 states. We did it, Aaron signed, his movements relaxed and happy. We actually did it. I leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat against my cheek. We'd faced fire twice, betrayal from those closest to us, and threats to our independence, but we'd emerged stronger, building something beautiful from the ashes. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Proud of you both. Dad's practicing his presentation signs for next week's conference. Love you." I showed Aaron, who smiled and signed, "Family is complicated, but worth fighting for." I signed back. As darkness fell, we went inside to prepare for tomorrow's training session. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, built on mutual respect, hard-won trust, and the knowledge that together, we could face any fire that came our way. The next morning brought new challenges, as every morning did, but now we faced them as a team, supported by family who'd learned to see our strength instead of our limitations. The scars remained, both visible and hidden, but they no longer defined us. We were more than our disabilities, more than our trauma. We were educators, advocates, and partners. Most importantly, we were proof that from the deepest silence, the strongest voices could emerge. The training session went smoothly until Victoria McNathaniel showed up. She was our new interpreter, hired by the fire department to help with communication during our workshops. Aaron and I exchanged glances when she walked in, her movements too precise, her smile too practiced. Something felt off. During the break, she approached me with a clipboard. "I need you both to sign these insurance forms," she said, her lips moving carefully. "Standard procedure for contractors." I started reading through the dense legal text when Aaron tapped my shoulder. He signed quickly. "Look at page 3, power of attorney section." My blood ran cold. Buried in the paperwork was language that would give Victoria control over our business decisions. I pushed the clipboard back unsigned. She frowned but said nothing, tucking it into her bag. That evening, we researched Victoria McNathaniel. No interpreter certifications, no employment history with the fire department. But there was a connection. She'd worked at the law firm my parents had hired for the conservatorship. Aaron's hands moved sharply. "They're not giving up. They're just changing tactics." The next morning, our business bank account was frozen. The bank claimed suspicious activity, but when we arrived to sort it out, Mom was there with Victoria and a man in an expensive suit. They'd filed an injunction claiming we'd misused trust fund money for our business. "This is for your protection," Mom insisted, her signs stilted. "You're not equipped to handle finances of this magnitude." I felt that familiar rage building, but Aaron's hand on my arm kept me steady. We left without engaging, but the damage was done. Without access to our accounts, we couldn't pay for materials, venue rentals, or even groceries. Aisha texted that night, "Emergency, don't come to your apartment." We met her at a coffee shop where she explained breathlessly that our parents had convinced our landlord we were mentally incompetent. They'd shown him the conservatorship filing, claimed we were dangers to ourselves and other tenants. He was starting eviction proceedings. "But you withdrew the petition," Aaron signed to Aisha. "They refiled," she replied, tears streaming. "Different approach. Now they're claiming financial exploitation, saying you manipulated them into giving you money." The walls were closing in. Every direction we turned, another obstacle appeared. Our car had a boot on it. Apparently we'd missed payments, though we knew we'd paid. Aaron's disability benefits were suspended pending review. My teaching position was under investigation after anonymous complaints about my erratic behavior. We stayed with Aaron's firefighter brother for 3 nights before my parents found us there too. They arrived with Victoria and 2 security guards, claiming they had emergency custody papers. The documents looked official, but something was wrong with the judge's signature. Aaron's brother stepped between us and the guards. "This is my home. Leave now." The confrontation escalated quickly. Dad pushed past, grabbing my arm. Aaron moved to intervene, but with his injured leg, he stumbled. I watched him fall, his face contorting in pain as his healing leg twisted. That's when something inside me snapped. 25 years of being treated like broken glass, of being seen as less than, of having others make decisions for me. It all crystallized into perfect clarity. I signed to Victoria, knowing she'd understand. "You made one mistake. You learned ASL to deceive us, but you didn't learn our community." Her face paled as I continued signing, but not to her, to the security guards. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, had been signing back. He was Coda, a child of deaf adults. "She's not a real interpreter," I signed to him. "Check her certification." The guard frowned, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, he was showing his partner something on the screen. They stepped back, hands raised. "We're not getting involved in family disputes with fraudulent documents," the older guard announced. Mom's composure finally cracked completely. She lunged at me, screaming words I couldn't hear. Dad caught her, but his face was ugly with rage. Victoria tried to salvage the situation, pulling out more papers, but the guards were already leaving. Aaron's brother had called the police. 2 officers arrived, one of whom knew Aaron from the fire department. They examined the custody papers, made some calls, and determined they were forgeries. Victoria was arrested on the spot for fraud and impersonation. My parents were given a warning about filing false documents. As the officers led Victoria away, she signed something to my mother that made her face go white. Later, Aisha told me Victoria had threatened to expose everything: the financial manipulation, the forged documents, the conspiracy to control my trust fund. The next days were a whirlwind of damage control. Aaron and I worked frantically to restore our accounts, save our business, and protect ourselves from further attacks. But my parents weren't finished. They pivoted to emotional warfare. Mom started calling my clients, telling them about my mental instability. Dad approached Aaron's doctors, suggesting his head injury had caused personality changes. They even contacted the fire department where we'd been teaching, claiming we were running a scam. Each attack required hours to counter. We provided documentation, gathered witness statements, and slowly rebuilt our credibility. But the stress was showing. Aaron's leg wasn't healing properly because he couldn't rest. My lungs ached constantly from anxiety. Then Aisha made her choice. She arrived at Aaron's brother's house with boxes of documents, years Years of financial records showing how our parents had siphoned money from my trust. Bank statements, forged signatures, false expense reports, everything. I can't watch them destroy you, she signed, her hands shaking. Not again. We spent the night organizing evidence. Aaron's firefighter brothers helped, creating a clear timeline of fraud and manipulation. By morning, we had enough to protect ourselves and expose the truth. But I hesitated. These were still my parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd saved my life once, even if they'd failed me since. Aaron understood my conflict, but his signs were firm. They won't stop. You know they won't. The meeting with our lawyer was sobering. Criminal charges were possible. Fraud, forgery, attempted kidnapping with those fake custody papers. Our parents could face serious jail time. Or, the lawyer suggested, we could pursue a restraining order and civil action. Less devastating, but still protective. Aaron and I signed to each other privately, our hands hidden under the table. We developed our own shorthand, jokes and references only we understood. Finally, we decided we would file for a restraining order and demand full restitution of stolen trust funds. In exchange, we wouldn't pursue criminal charges. It felt like mercy, though Aaron worried it was weakness. My parents were served papers at their home. The sheriff told us later that Mom collapsed, sobbing. Dad aged 10 years in 10 seconds, but they didn't contest it. Their lawyer, the legitimate one, advised them to accept our terms. The restraining order meant no contact for 5 years. They had to stay 500 feet away from us, our home, our work. The financial settlement returned what they'd taken plus interest, enough to secure our business's future, and then some. Aisha chose to maintain limited contact with them, but she was clear about her boundaries. She'd testify if needed, support us publicly, and never again be part of their manipulations. The business recovered faster than we'd expected. The fire department community rallied around us, angry that 2 of their own had been targeted. We received more contracts, more opportunities to teach and advocate. 6 months after the confrontation, we presented at a national conference on disability rights. Aaron walked without a limp now, his signs confident and clear. I spoke through an interpreter, sharing our story of resilience and the importance of autonomy for disabled people. In the audience, I spotted a familiar face. My grandmother, 93 now, sat in the front row. She'd chosen us over her own son, my father. After the presentation, she hugged us both, her weathered hands signing, proud, so proud. I cried tears of joy.